your childhood favorite media is hard, and it usually comes with a lot of baggage in the form of nostalgia. Booting it up again feels less like starting a game and more like stepping into a memory. Old memories come back to light, some that would have been near impossible to remember without a revisit. But new memories can also form, some even casting a hazy negative fog over the thing that you once loved. And trying to sift through all that can be quite a nightmare. And that's how I feel when it comes to Generation 1 Pokemon games. I've been playing these games since before I could even form memories. I don't even remember getting my original copy. I just have vague memories of sitting around on the couch playing the game with some Nickelodeon cartoons on in the background. But I do know one thing, and that's that I had a lot of fun. And years later, I've played these games countless times, watched people play them, break them, analyze them, and I've listened to hours of commentary, critique, and praise, but somewhere along the way, a strange question began to gnaw at me. Is my opinion on these games still even my own, or a collective narrative I've absorbed over the years of content consumption? Is it even possible to have an original opinion on these games, and what does it even mean to have your own opinion? And why don't I stop treating this like a philosophy course, making up stupid questions to answer, when maybe all I need to do is stop asking questions and press start again, and go back to the very beginning to find out whether the haters are right. Maybe it just doesn't hold up, or maybe the tangled code is stronger than it seems, strong enough to even uphold the towering, messy legacy of Pokemon. I think one of the continuously most interesting things to discuss about Generation 1 is its enduring nature, its legacy, and its ability to stay some people's favorite game no matter what and how many other games come out. To some, this game is the best thing that ever happened to them. To others, this game is a broken piece of shit. And sometimes it's even hard to completely argue one way or the other, because it's very true that this game is full of complete jank. Half the game mechanics don't work, the other half are bugged, and if you play on original hardware, it is slow as shit, and it's hard to even see the screen without the power of the sun at your disposal. It's a little bit of a mess these days, and I largely understand why someone new to the series or someone who didn't grow up with these games would say they're not very good. It's why even me, someone who played the games as a kid, would recommend people start with the Gen 3 remakes if they want to play Kanto, or another game or region entirely when choosing their very first Pokemon game. But that being said, when discussing Generation 1's problems, you do have to put one thing into perspective, and that's that this game is just really, really impressive. And you can't take that away from it. Sure, it has some of these problems, game-breaking glitches even, but it is a 25 to 40 hour RPG with 151 unique monsters, ton of features, trainers, and a whole world to explore with unique sprites for everything. All on this tiny single little cartridge. And if that doesn't sound impressive, just try to put yourself back into 1996, 1998, that time frame when people were first playing these games. And if you want to compare it to the competition, just go pick up any other Game Boy RPG. Seriously, go pick one up and try it out for a day or something, because I'm sure you'll find that a lot of them are kind of shit. Sure, there are some good ones like the Dragon Warrior games, Final Fantasy Legend, just to name a few, but keep diving deeper into the catalog of Game Boy RPGs, and frankly, the Game Boy just doesn't have a lot of good, lengthy RPGs. And that has a lot to do with the limitations of the device itself and not the imagination and creativity of the developers. Also, most of the problems in the game can be largely avoided or completely bypassed by just playing this game on an emulator with speed up or save states, which is honestly how most new people are going to play these games anyways, most likely even on an iPhone or something like that. Another thing that just makes this game so endearing, as well as so enduring against all the criticism it has received, is that it kind of even welcomes it with open arms in a lot of discussions that the game promotes. This game is just filled with mysteries, some intentional and some not. Mew under the truck, missing no. Lavender Town's existence in general. No other Pokemon game has or even allows such a sense of intrigue that allows the players to just theorize and craft their own stories and ideas of what might be going on when the game is not turned on. And it's also what made this game live on past people just posting their reviews online or talking about the game for a little bit. And it's why I think your opinion on these games will heavily depend on when and how you played this game for the first time. If you play it now, many of the mainstream quirks and mysteries have been solved, but I do think many of us who were pondering a lot of these mysteries since when we first played this as kids is also why I think this game has cultivated such a passionate fan base that has wanted to stick around and not only play these games repeatedly, but play all the other new ones and discuss them in such fervorous detail. And the thing that probably gets people in the most heated discussions with this game has to be Generation 1 is most known for having a lot of glitches and quirks in its battling mechanics, from wrap and sleep looping endlessly leading to more hair pulling than honestly any other Pokemon game. If you nuke a Pokemon with Hyper Beam and they die, you don't even need to wait for it to recharge. And I don't know why, even after 20 years later, I still continuously seem to think that Pokemon die after they lose all their HP, but maybe that's just me. If a multi-hit attack crits them, all of them crit, and on top of it all, Psychic Pokemon are nigh invincible in this game. It's absolutely insane, especially if you are playing this game for the first time nowadays, especially if you come back to this game after playing a lot of the other ones. But I don't really want to just go into listing all of the glitches and issues, as I've already heard people do that a billion times, and I did want to talk about how all these problems can be seen in a different light, and that's how most of these problems are always seen as something that's very bad and something that they should never have done and they should have fixed it, because the game's just a broken piece of shit, right? But given how many years I've been playing these games, it's always just still fun to go back and play Generation 1, because I feel the need, it's required for you to play these games differently than any other Pokemon game, especially the more modern ones. You cannot play Pokemon Yellow in the same way that you play Pokemon X and Y. You just can't. And it's not just because Pokemon X and Y introduced things like Mega Evolution, it's just because so many things just work differently here. In most games, Pikachu is a pretty good very early on games, but almost always will drop off. But I still found so much useful for this little guy in my recent playthrough of Pokemon Yellow, all the way through to the very end. Its high speed and just physicality, even if you don't evolve it, makes it quite a monster, especially against those pesky wrap looping Pokemon who don't even get the chance to attack it or even put you on a loose because of how speedy it is. And that became very valuable, more so valuable than even a lot of other games, I feel. And even more so, I found that I was constantly using its high speed stat of 90 to its advantage against most Pokemon. And speaking of the dreaded Psychic type, the most broken thing that has ever existed in a Pokemon game, I was very, very, very worried about Sabrina's gym going into it in Saffron City, because my team didn't really have many foils to it at that time. I didn't have any Bug-type Pokemon or anything like that, and all Psychic Pokemon, in fact, most of them were completely outclassing mine. And I thought I would have to do some serious grinding, because at that point my Pokemon were like a level 30 and the top one here is 50. But once I started going through the gym, the weird nature of these games really started to come to light. First off, they have a lot of Slowpokes. In this gym, and our friend Pikachu can basically single-handedly outclass all of those easily. And normally you wouldn't throw out a fighting-type Pokemon against a Psychic in any other game, but here, Karate Chop is kind of a broken move and is considered a normal type, and it also has an extremely high crit rate. So high I can't even remember a time that it didn't crit through in my last playthrough of these games. And a lot of Psychic types also have low defenses, so throwing in my Primeape with Karate Chop becomes a very viable strategy against these pesky Psychic types. And even more ridiculous is one of the biggest highlights of this entire playthrough is when I threw out a level 30 Raticate up against Sabrina's level 50 Kadabra and Alakazam, and it barely took a single goddamn hit. And it's moments like this that are just so unique to Generation 1. I don't think this would have happened in any other game. This stuff just really couldn't happen in any of the later games because they are balanced. But no, I want fucking chaos, alright? Because chaos happens here all the time. It's just the name of the game in Generation 1. Moments where the game just forces you to recontextualize everything that you knew about Pokemon in the last 25 years of gaming by remembering where it all started with this very first game. But it's not all just crazy fun weird shit. There are some really crippling, weird, annoying aspects that later games definitely fix. But one thing that makes this game's power fantasy of weird things weaker is definitely the move pools. And this is one part of the game where being a Gen 1 apologist becomes a lot harder. Now sure, you can have a lot of weird, unique movesets on Pokemon in this game, but there is nothing truly sadder than having a level 45 Charizard that is still using Ember as its solo fire type move, as it doesn't even learn Flamethrower until level 46, which is kind of just ridiculous. And this makes me wonder why so many people were obsessed with this orangish red pseudo dragon when it only spits out tinier flames smaller than my candle lighter. Ooh, I'm terrified. Which is something the later games like the Gen 3 remakes remedy so well, with giving Charizard the move much earlier at level 34, but it also still gets Fire Spin at level 55, which is just stupid and useless to me. It's weird. We can't defend everything about those games. But there are still some standouts, specifically in Pokemon Yellow, that fixes the first two games, Red and Blue, a little bit, making it the one that I'd truly recommend for real newcomers and that want to try out Generation 1. Your trusty side companion Pikachu learns Thunderbolt at level 26, making it an early game monster and reliable sweeper. You can even get a Good Boy Mankey to level 9 and it will have access to Low Kick all before Brock, which in Red and Blue can become a massive first challenge, especially if you choose Charmander. And there's no real easy way to get around Brock with Charmander other than just grinding him up. Also, because this game is the first, HMs were definitely still a requirement here, but overall, because of the lacking moves in general that they have in their move pools, it's not really as annoying to me, at least personally, to fill up one of those coveted 4 spots with an HM move. I had a lot less heartburn giving my Primeape access to Strength, as it's not really a bad move, and really I was just sweeping everyone with Low Kick and Karate Chop anyways. The game also sets you up with a lot of options, like the Given Lapras as a mid or late game Surf and Ice Beam tank that really helps you clear out some of the game's final challenges. But they've also made the unforgivable choice in all the Generation 1 games to make the move Gust a normal type move and not give Pidgey or Pidgeotto more likely a flying type move unless, wait, hold on, take a guess. How long does it take for Pidgeotto to learn fucking Wing Attack? If you guessed 31, you would be right, and I would really doubt that you actually guessed that number out of like 100. But this means that you might actually access the move Fly before you potentially level up your Pidgeotto enough to learn another flying type move, which is just absolutely pathetic. Overall though, I don't think this game's quite as broken or at least unplayable as some might think. Not that I was ever a die-hard these games are trash and broken and never play them, but I think it's still cool how I'm able to still find new things and enjoyment from these original games, and one of the other reasons for that is definitely lots of people have very strong opinions about Generation 1 Pokemon. They are either the most precious darlings from your childhood and no other generation beats them, or they are the laziest, most lackluster concepts for what Pokemon could and should be. Regardless if you like them or not though, these original 151 Pokemon did their fucking job and they sold the entire concept of Pokemon in general. It's in my opinion that they are the entire reason why this series first took off. And one of my favorite things about Generation 1 is the art design of the Pokemon, the characters, and overall the world design and how it all comes together to fuse into a unique, wonderful atmosphere. There are still so many limitations to games on the Game Boy with such limited storage and colors, and it can be really hard to go back to them sometimes, or sometimes to even enjoy the games the year they came out, but Gen 1 games feel so magical. Every town feels so distinct in its atmosphere, especially when you add a tad bit of color like in the enhanced versions with Pokemon Yellow. And in combination with wonderful music, I could just wander around these towns talking to NPCs endlessly, even after I've done my dozenth playthrough. It's even more impressive since these games have been remade to look more graphically impressive, but it's not just fun to explore all these Gen 1 games, but there's so much freedom. Besides for Scarlet and Violet, there isn't a Pokemon game in the entire series with this much freedom to explore the world in whatever order you want to. Besides for a few Snorlaxes and thirsty guards in the way, you can tackle any portion of this game in any order you want and in a completely different order from your very first playthrough, and often doing that can even reward you with an extra bit of challenge. And the only real issues I have with the game going back is the dungeon-like areas in the game, like Silph or even Victory Road. They are either bogged down with strength puzzles or slow moving spinny tiles, which honestly I forgot how slow these spinny tiles were until I played the game without speed up. And many of the trainers and wild Pokemon in the area use the exact same Pokemon. It got so bad, I felt like I kept fighting the same Pokemon over and over again, and it got so bad, I got curious into looking what are the most used Pokemon by Generation 1 trainers to prove with some facts and data how bad it truly was. And luckily someone already did all the work for me, so shout out to this dude on Reddit. And while some of the answers might not shock you that much, the numbers might. The top 3 most used Pokemon by trainers are Coughing, Machop, and Rattata, with many of their evolutions also being pretty high on that list, pretty much because they are used by every Team Rocket grunt, biker, or youngster in the area. Also, a very similar post was made by the same exact person about which Pokemon were just not used at all in the entire game, and it's really sad to see this because so many of the coolest mons are not even used by other characters in the game to utilize them to their fullest potential, and the only time you'd fight these are maybe in the wild or against friends. I would defend these Pokemon sprites to my dying breath. Yeah, I said it. Even the ones that people hate and meme on the most. This is still one of the hardest choices every single time, trying to decide which one of these little guys to choose. In fact, usually I choose one based on what my plans are for the game rather than which one I just seem to like the most that day. But also I am still a Squirtle Squad member for life. Early on too, I just forgot how cool Beedrill can look. He's a pretty sick sprite, and maybe one of the coolest looking versions of Beedrill that we've ever had. Pikachu is the chunkiest and most lovable cute boys of all time, and in general most of these Pokemon are quite round, making these some of the cutest iterations of these Pokemon ever. Then there's the Drowsies, the Wigglytuffs, and the Golbats. Dear God, get that away from me. But overall, I do still love the weirdos, and come at me if you don't like the weirdos. I think they always have a place in these games. Maybe they're not the best versions, but sometimes the weirder the sprite, the more I actually want to use them in the game because it just makes them stand out from the other one. It's also why I used Executor in this last playthrough, because bro looks like a complete freak in these games. So yeah, I am a big Gen 1 Pokemon sprite stan no matter what anyone else says. But it's not just the Pokemon, the trainers and gym leaders are also very memorable. You can't tell me you do not remember the very first time you met Lance. Also in Pokemon Yellow, they have an iteration of Jesse and James in these games, which is also just really fun, especially as a fan of the anime series. But speaking of Jesse and James and some other inclusions in these games, I think it's time to start talking a little bit about. As for the story of Generation 1, well, it's definitely still there, that is for sure. There's a lot of good messaging for kids trying to learn how to not be an asshole in life and teaching kids how to make new friends with trading mechanics, but personally I do think these games probably still have the most lackluster main plot of the entire series. There's some bad guys, they steal Pokemon, you're a 10-year-old that needs to kick their ass with a team of 6. Even as a kid, I was talking to everyone I could find, but mostly just to confirm if they have an item or not to see what they had to say. And most of them are just there to complain or give you a hint about some new game's mechanics. There are a couple moments in this game that do stand out as quite special though, like the time you first encounter the deceased mother of a Cubone haunting the tower in Lavender Town, or just taking over Silph. While it's a little bit tedious, is quite a fun power fantasy, especially for a 10-year-old just beating on a bunch of old men. Hey, yo! And like I said before, the mysteries littered throughout this game, like in the Cinnabar Island mansion, are just fun for theory crafting and making the mind wander. But all in all, the main plot of the game is just bare as a Cubone. The real main affair throughout the game is your RPG adventure, taking on all 8 gyms, the Elite Four, and of course... And some of my favorite, most satisfying moments still in this game are just vibe checking this sassy little shit and destroying him with pure talent and skill. That being said, the tools and structure this game provides to curate your own story and fuel your imagination is where it shines the most. Leveling up a team of Pokemon that have full coverage from any threat is just as fun as any other game, and sweating through long routes with tons of trainers and only one Pokemon left that has like 5 PP left on a move to narrowly make it back to a PC in town, there's just nothing better. There isn't too many individual encounters or trainers in this game that are a massive wall like some later games, but there are plenty of exhausting routes that force you to understand the mechanics of the game. But there's also just the bullshit habits that you take from playing your very first Pokemon that I still do to this day, like mashing all the buttons in sync with shaking the Pokemon, thinking it will help my chances of catching a Pokemon, when really all it does is decrease the time that I'll get arthritis. Especially back in the day though, sharing those experiences with your friend is something really special, and I think that's that's the true story of Generation 1. And I just spent more time early on playing these Pokemon games, trading stories with friends. And while I don't remember every adventure I've had throughout the series playing these games, I do have this collection of memories that have formed my opinions on this game that I cherish very deeply. But now it's finally time to try to answer the question, is Generation 1 Pokemon still peak? Now 20 minutes into the video like any good YouTuber. And honestly, that question has been really hard to answer because for some, this game's so important to them that it can only be their favorite game in the series. And to others, no matter what I have to say, they will still hate this game for just being boring and old. Answering the question, is this generation peak, is so hard because really, this game just stands as the foundation of the series rather than its pinnacle, and that's where I think it truly belongs. I think the more important final question that occupies my thoughts is, why do I keep coming back? And the simplest reason, despite all the good and bad I've said about this game, is it's one of the few games that is able to transport me back into a different time period. When I play these games, I just feel this deep connection to my childhood, because this is the series that taught me how to play video games in general, and despite the criticism the games have gotten over the years for being vague or even confusing or anything else I've said, Generation 1 trained a whole generation of kids how to solve problems, even how to make friends. It taught us that sometimes the answers won't be clear and sometimes there will be various paths in life, and despite how much it is memed nowadays, I do think there is a direct line from me picking up these games first time as a selfish little kid to becoming a curious teen and an adult that strives to be a good person and respect the world and people around me with the power of friendship. Which sounds a little cheesy, but is still the backbone of a lot of society. These games are directly responsible for me making some of my best friends of my entire life. Especially as a kid, because I was pretty much unable to make friends unless I asked someone what their favorite pizza topping was or if they played Pokemon. And I think that is why this series did so phenomenally back then, and it's even outlasted all of the criticism. The drive to have that same experience that you had as a kid is why we ultimately come back to these games, despite all the toxicity that has emerged in the fandom throughout the years. These are the games that started it all, and I think that's why we keep going back to them. And that's why I have such an adoration and feel the need to thank the developers for these games and this series that I love so much. That all being said though, thanks for hearing me out and letting me talk about Pokemon for probably too long. If you like this video, maybe go check out one of my other videos if you haven't. Otherwise, maybe just go tell a friend and spread the word of the tentacle. God, I hate myself. Now this video took a little bit longer for me to make it than I really wanted it to, but it's finally out, which is great. I've never said this out loud though, I really do plan on making a video like this for every single Pokemon game, as well as maybe moving on to some other series that I want to make some more videos like this, but I've actually never said that out loud. It might be obvious to some, but if to others, surprise, that's what my plan is for this, and maybe eventually even put these all into one compilation video. But if that sounds cool, let me know. If you're really into this, what that sounds like, and hearing more videos like this, then please subscribe to the channel. And with that being said, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and see you next time.